the CEO of Buildworks Group, Raoul Gamsu. Also just keeping in mind, as you mentioned, they are going to be operating under a new name from Monday onwards, and they're also going to be listing on the main board on the 20th of September. Raoul, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, let's start off with a change in name, Consolidated Infrastructure Group. Clearly a lot of changes happening for the company, and you're really starting to focus predominantly on the power and electricity side of the business. Give us your strategy behind changing the name.
Yeah, well, if you go back to 2008, we at the time acquired a company called Consolidated Power Projects, which is Conco. But a month ago, we closed all the preliminaries and they completed their warranty. So it was only fair that, you know, the group's profile reflects Conco's. And that today is electricity. It's more about the establishment of infrastructure. So it's only right that our name represents what we are and what we do. And we chose Consolidated Infrastructure to have the whole theme, you know, with Consolidated Power Projects, and to reflect that we are involved in the continent, you know, particularly in 14 African countries, developing high voltage electrical substations and putting in overhead cables, and obviously in the new area, which is establishing and helping to build renewable energy wind farms. So, you know, we're quite excited about what we now represent as opposed to where we were, you know, 2-3 years ago.
All right, well, 84% of your revenue at this point in time is really accountable to the fact that Conco is doing quite well, and it is in a very lucrative, interesting space. When you initially listed in 2007, it was all about supplying materials to the construction industry. We know the construction industry has come under significant pressure. What are you going to be doing with that side of the business?
No, you know, every business has its cycles and its ups and downs, and this is a very tough time for that particular sector. But just because, you know, it's tough doesn't mean you must run away from opportunities. So whilst we have to work our way through the tough times, and over time, you know, you'll get the right kind of returns out of that. But there's no short-term fixes for those particular sectors right now, you know. So you just have to grin and bear it for a period.
Well, you're in two very lucrative spaces at this point in time. You're in the power industry and the infrastructure industry. You also operate in many African countries, which means that you could start to capitalize on both industries. There are good prospects for building on the continent and also for power penetration, because there's a little bit of a problem when it comes to power on the continent. How do you see that playing out?
Well, you know, when we bought the business, if you actually look at it, you've got less than 1 in 4 people in the continent who have access to electricity. You've got massive urbanization happening, you know, all throughout Africa, together with the drive for commodities. So the need for power is just, you know, growing at above average growth rates. And we're uniquely positioned in that we've operated historically in 14 countries. I think we're now at 16 in Africa alone that we've got experience operating in. And, you know, we've got the track record. I mean, we started operating in Africa in 1994. So, you know, this isn't something that's a year old and we haven't been burnt and got our scars doing it. So, you know, we're very well positioned in that sense. And then as well, we've opened a business now, you know, subject to Reserve Bank approval in Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is forecasting growth in electricity usage of 8% per annum, which is absolutely massive. So, you know, we think we've set the platform for good, solid, steady growth over the next decade. But it's going to take time to yield the investments that we're putting in.
All right, tell us about what you're doing in the power space at this point. You mentioned wind power, obviously looking at alternative energies as well. What do you think the way forward is for the continent?
Look, the key though is renewable energy has got massive potential at this point in a couple of domains. One in North Africa, there's huge projects going on. In Morocco, they just signed a 260 megawatt project. We're not participating in it, but we certainly pitched for the business. There's potential in Kenya for, again, 300 megawatts. And in South Africa, you know, with the tariffs where they are, you're going to see massive growth in wind energy to start.
What does your order book look like at this point? 1.2 billion rand, what did it look like for Conco last year when you acquired it?
The order books are still intact. You know, we've had that consistent order book. Obviously, the economic crisis hit and we managed to maintain our status. And that's still intact. We're seeing growing potential. You know, I don't want to say yet that's materializing, but it's certainly, we're looking at a growing space in our minds. And I think which is unique, you know, relative to most of our peers who at the moment are looking at shrinking potential.
Raoul, just very quickly, looking at Conco, you acquired it 500 million rand. It was a great time for an acquisition. Are you looking at any acquisitions at this point? Of course, you are in a closed period.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, our focus is really organic growth in the business. We believe there's enough potential there. You know, with our new divisions in renewable and in the Middle East, and together with even expanding this Africa network, we think we can achieve the right kind of growth rates without, acquisitions. But we're kind of entrepreneurial in that way. Nothing, we don't like sit back. If something comes along, we certainly aren't going to stand back from it.
Well, unfortunately.